Today, right now, you have more power at your fingertips than entire generations that came before you. Think about that. That's what technology really is. It's possibility, it's adaptability, it's capability. But in the end, it's only a tool. What's a hammer without a person who swings it? It's not about what technology can do, it's about what you can do with it. You're the voice, and it's the microphone. When you're the artist, it's the paintbrush. We are living in the future we always dreamed of. We have mixed reality that changes how we see the world, and AI empowering us to change the world we see. You have more power at your fingertips than entire generations that came before you. So here's the question: what will you do with it?
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. So what will we do with it? I'm hoping to give some inspiration and some examples of what can we do with that technology in this era of philanthropy and how it's becoming even more important. Hélène Barnekow is my name, and I head up Microsoft's operations here in Sweden. I'm really happy to be here with you today. We live in a very exciting time, and clearly, technology has never played a more important role for our lives. It changes how we do things as people, it changes how we do things as organizations, as companies, and actually as entire societies. You've probably heard people, politicians, business people talking about the Industrial Revolution 4.0. I quite like that because it puts what we are going through now into a continuum. Because it's not like we started to change 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And sometimes you almost think that because you feel everybody throwing these acronyms at you, AI, IoT, cloud, 5G, etc. And it feels like we just invented something great to happen. This is part of what humankind is. We keep changing things. We keep evolving things. We keep innovating. So we're going into the next industrial revolution. And one thing we can be certain of, the companies or organizations who didn't make the transitions, they are not part of defining the next generation. If you didn't embrace computer, electronics, and IT a couple of decades ago, you're probably no longer here. If you were an analog camera organization, without mentioning names, who did not become a pioneer in digital, you may not be here anymore. So it is so important for us to take that next step. The one thing that I think sets this era apart is actually the pace. Things are going faster than ever. And we live in this exponential world. We really live in the exponential world where you sometimes almost feel vertige how quickly it goes. And yet, we do know that it will never go as slowly as it does today, because the pace is only increasing. And so with all of that, this is not a surprise to me. When PwC did a research around CEOs and what they consider to be the global trends that will actually transform their business the most, digital comes number one. And it's among some very significant trends as shifting global economic power, climate change, resource scarcity. And they say digital is the number one. It's our number one priority because that will have the most impact on us. And with that pace I talked about before. If we look a little bit closer to home, this is a UK research that says 45% of charities don't have a digital strategy. And this must be really difficult. I agree with you, there's a lot of social media connected to charity, but the digital strategies can be more than that. And I can imagine it feels quite overwhelming sometimes to have a digital strategy. You may be a smaller company, you may not have all the expertise at hand, and some of those big things about AI and cloud may not seem that relevant to you, actually. At Microsoft, we think it's extremely relevant. That's also why you have met some of my colleagues here who focus on this. But we also think it's really relevant from how we look at digital transformation. And so I will now share with you a few things of how we approach it, but also examples of that we have done or others have done. The first thing to say about this, that this is not about technology. It's not about IT. It doesn't start with any of that. It starts with your purpose in life. and how you want to fire that up even more, how you want to optimize, how you want to get more out of it. That's what this has to be. It has to start there. And we have 4 cornerstones of how we look at the digital transformation. And it actually starts with your audience. How do we engage with our audiences? And those audiences, exactly to Emily's point, they are now used to social media, and they're used to having all the data points, and they're used to getting all the proof points and having interactions. That's what your audiences actually live in today, whether it's in philanthropy or something else. So that's what shapes them. The other one, extremely important, how do we empower our employees? Because when we empower them, things will happen in whatever organization it is. And to empower our employees, they have to get access to data, they have to have digital tools. Also to attract them. We want, of course, employees who come and work with us who have the right purpose and the right heart set, but also the right mindset in terms of how can we do more to get more value out of it. How do we transform our solutions? Things that weren't possible before to actually do a solution on is suddenly possible. How do we do that? How do we find that? By combining purpose with technology. And then optimizing our operations. Because if we optimize our operations, we can do so much more. And we can get more done. So, if we start on the first one, it's a really nice example, which is not complicated at all. This is a non-profit US organization. It's called Ducks Unlimited, so you can probably guess what their purpose in life is. They have 50,000 volunteers. It's a nationwide organization. Does anybody here know them? Ah, yeah, nice. So their goal was actually to re-engage with their audience. How do they get more engagement with their audience and with a target audience? They had a massive amount of data. It took them a long time to work through the data. And they introduced something, it's not important what it's called, but something which is called Power BI, which is really about bringing that data into something really easy, visual, and very, very targeted for that area you are. Which meant that if there was a big fundraising or big events going on in Louisiana, a couple of hours later you would see exactly in Louisiana what happened, what kind of funds were raised, or what activities and events actually created results. This is not a very difficult example, but it's very powerful. Because if your donors and volunteers understand what value you're creating, you're much more likely to keep donating, keep being engaged. The other thing is that you actually turn people with data points into ambassadors. It's very easy to tell a story when you can actually say what value it created. So it's a really nice and not very complicated example. If you look at empowering your employees, I also really like this example because of its simplicity. This is from WWF in Brazil, actually, where they used to work in very old-fashioned spreadsheets that we've all worked in. We've all worked in spreadsheets and done everything manually and sent it to a colleague, and you get it back and you change it again, etc., etc. So they changed this for a cloud-based system called MS Project. And in that, everybody can share, everybody can work at the same time. It became so much more efficient. They reported back to us that they increased their productivity with 10%. 10% may not sound that much, but if you have 10 people, it's a whole person that you can actually do more with. Save time or do more with. And of course, the employees also have a better experience and feel like they're empowered to do something. My third example is a really, really important one. This is the Red Cross in Norway. They came up with, they identified the challenge that it's so difficult to find out when there's healthcare issues that can also escalate into be something very serious in remote areas. So how do you find out? Before you will know, because you're not out in those areas. So before you will even know, you may even have a healthcare crisis. So they came up with something called community-based surveillance. So by actually enabling people anywhere out there in the field to send a text in their own local language that there seems to be healthcare issues or there is this, whatever signs they're seeing, that gets translated into the languages of the volunteer worker, and then all of this goes into the cloud so you can see when many of these are coming in. We could actually, or Red Cross could actually then intervene on an early stage and actually stop epidemics to to spread. This is a little bit more complicated than the others, but not hugely complicated. And the really nice thing about this is that this was the Red Cross in Norway, together with the ICT industry in Norway, who came up with this solution. So cross companies, IT companies in Norway together with the Red Cross. And I think this is a really important recipe for in a digital era. That kind of collaboration is, I think, key to what we need to establish. And the fourth one, I don't think anybody missed this, so this feels more relevant than ever, actually. Nobody missed this headline about 1 million species. I think none of us could sleep well that night when we saw this. It was such an impactful scare for all of us, I think. Now, there is an organization that I'm sure many of you know of, which is Wild Me. And they are very advanced on actually working with citizen science and artificial intelligence in actually mapping species and being able to follow what they're doing. And this is so powerful that I actually want to show you another video of what this is.
There are an estimated 90,000 threatened species across the globe. To understand what puts a species at risk, we need to know where are they born, how many survive, where do they go, how far do they go.
At Wildbook, we are using an algorithm to digitally tag individual animals, much like a human fingerprint. So this is a new whale shark for science.
Yes, and we named it Wilma.
Wilma the whale shark.
Microsoft AI gives us the building blocks to analyze public streams of photos and videos and identify individual animals in an instant. AI can determine location, date of sighting, migration patterns, and even an animal's social group. And an intelligent agent can contact the content's owner and ask for the missing detail. Microsoft's AI for Good initiative gives us the technology to create a comprehensive view of the planet's biodiversity. In the last 10 years, we've identified 10 times more whale sharks than ever recorded in human history. By leveraging citizen scientists together with researchers, we can form conservation policies. Microsoft AI will help us accelerate our work by empowering people to take action. What we get back is, wow, this is amazing.
So this is a really powerful example. This includes drones and massive data points and artificial intelligence and cameras, etc., etc. But there's no way you would be able to do this if you did not infuse technology into your higher purpose of actually saving species. So I'm really motivated by this one. Now, how do we do this? How do we actually move to bring this technology, the digital transformation into the lives that you're living? So I do believe that it is a huge shift. We kind of go from an old world to the new world. When I had that continuum of the Industrial Revolution, there was, of course, the one with when Taylorism was really the mass production and the division of labor and hierarchies. And we very much have that as part of our organization still today. Information has been scarce. It's mainly been about static hierarchies. We tend to work in silos. Large companies, I worked in lots of large companies. It's probably our biggest enemy that we tend to work in silos. We work in the hierarchy that we actually belong to. To be able to do this, I think mindset-wise, we really need to move to that new world. Information is abundant. The fact that we can digest, analyze, and get real-time information will unlock so many of the challenges we have. And information has to be shared by everybody. It's not a power situation. It's not the right for a few. Dynamic networks. I think dynamic networks and collective value creation is maybe the most important one. If you look at the Norwegian Red Cross, that was not by doing your own thing in a silo. That was actually by opening up to, I think there were 10 or 11 IT companies from Norway. We open up and we collaborate, whether it's inside our own organizations or it's outside our own organizations. And I think this is absolutely critical to be able to create this type of impact. And I think my experience in terms of what are the key points to actually make a digital transformation. And I have 4 points that I think are really, and I've done it in many different types of companies, that I think are really important. It starts with I think it always starts with your strong focus on purpose connected to engaging with the audience. Because if you don't start there, you don't know why you're doing it, and you don't know who you're connecting it with. So that external focus is really important. When I work in private companies, I usually talk about customer obsession as my change platform, because then you get that connection to the people outside and the reason you're doing this, whether this is donors or something else. That's why we call it audience. I think you have to have an obsession to build a new type of organization. Going from that old world to the new world, you need to be almost obsessed. What does that new organization look like? How do you get people to feel empowered, to have transparency, to get access? And for this, I think the point that I think Emily talked about in the beginning, you need to build diverse organizations, truly diverse organizations. We cannot all look like one another when we go into a meeting room to really solve the big questions. And that comes with inclusion, because if you feel included, you will contribute from your different aspects, and then we will resolve so many more things that we could do otherwise. My third point is that I think we all need to have genuine focus on learning. With this pace I talked about before, whatever you learned a week ago, you're going to need to refill it, all of us. It's not just for some to learn more, it's actually all of us. And I think the learning organizations, they will win in the future, no matter where you actually work or function in the organizations. And my last point is that I do believe we all need to be driven by values. And when you're driven by values, you create a culture. And that culture is about how we do things. And how we do things will actually drive results and actually be the kind of organization that both donors and customers will be part of, and actually your employees want to be part of. And that's why culture is so important, and even more so in this digital world, I think. You may probably all have read about Microsoft because it is one of the largest companies in the world. Microsoft is on its own change journey. And I would say that this latest change journey, because there will be more, I'm sure, started about 5 years ago when Satya Nadella came in as CEO of Microsoft. And I think this is very unusual what he did for being such a large company and the CEO of such a large company. He started with exactly that. He started actually with a cultural journey and identifying how do we want Microsoft to look like, and what do we want them to do in the future? And these are the values that they come up with. Microsoft to be customer obsessed, really focused on how can we help our customers, whether they are a charity organization or a public sector customer or another customer. How do we empower others to do more? How do we drive a diverse and inclusive organization? Really, truly drive on diversity. You may find it easier, but in all the commercial organizations I worked for, this is easier to say than actually do. So if you don't have that focus, it will not happen, because it's actually norm recreation. So it's a really important point to have high on your agenda. And One Microsoft. And this goes back to what we talked about. Our old way of working was in hierarchies and very static. So how do you break those silos? How do we actually work across a huge company with 140,000 employees across the world? And how do we make a difference? And how do we make a difference for our customers, but how do we make a difference for the greater good? How do we make a difference for the world? So then you come back to how do you empower your employees actually to make a real significant difference? And for that, and to show you, this has been so impactful, I think for two reasons. You can see that it's impactful for our customers because Microsoft is doing well financially. You only do well if what you do is important to your customers. But it's also been really impactful for building the culture and letting our employees and our talent to contribute to a higher purpose. So what I will show you now goes back to actually foundation for this was in 2015, when there was an internal hackathon at Microsoft, where somebody came up with a greater purpose in saying, we need to help people who are blind or are somehow reduced visibility, because that's such a big problem in society. We want to help that. We want to resolve that with AI. And in that design process, Microsoft had also hired a number of software engineers who actually had that disability, so they knew what they were talking about. And this is now what you're going to see as the result here.
I'm Saqib Sheikh. I lost my sight when I was 7, and shortly after that I went to a school for the blind. And that's where I was introduced to talking computers, and that really opened up a whole new world of opportunities. I joined Microsoft 10 years ago as a software engineer. I love making things which improve people's lives. And one of the things I've always dreamt of since I was at university was this idea of something that could tell you at any moment what's going on around you.
I think it's a man jumping in the air doing a trick on a skateboard.
I teamed up with like-minded engineers to make an app which lets you know who and what is around you. It's based on top of the Microsoft Intelligence APIs, which makes it so much easier to make this kind of thing. The app runs on smartphones, but also on the Pivot Head smart glasses. When you're talking to a bigger group, sometimes you can talk and there's no response, and you think, is everyone listening really well, or are they half asleep? And you never know.
I see two faces, 40-year-old man with a beard looking surprised, 20-year-old woman looking happy.
The app can describe the general age and gender of the people around me and what their emotions are, which is incredible. One of the things that's most useful about the app is the ability to read out text.
Hello, good afternoon. Here's your menu.
Great, thank you. I can use the app on my phone to take a picture of the menu, and it's going to guide me on how to take that correct photo.
Move camera to the bottom right and away from the document.
And then it'll recognize the text. Read me the headings.
I see appetizers, salads, paninis, pizzas, pastas.
Years ago, this was science fiction. I never thought it would be something that you could actually do. But artificial intelligence is improving at an ever faster rate. And I'm really excited to see where we can take this. As engineers, we're always standing on the shoulders of giants, building on top of what went before. And in this case, we've taken years of research from Microsoft Research to pull this off.
I think it's a young girl throwing an orange frisbee in the park.
For me, it's about taking that far-off dream and building it one step at a time. I think this is just the beginning.
So this video, thank you. This video makes me really hopeful, because I feel this is such a strong example of how you really apply technology to something which would have been impossible before. He even says it would be, he would think it would be science fiction, and it's actually happening now. It also makes me hopeful because when you decide that you want to use technology for something which is great or good, it is completely doable. And it's actually not, it's not as difficult as it may sometimes seem when you hear AI, cloud, 5G, etc., because it's really applying it to real challenges and real purposes. So with that, I'd like to thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And thank you for everything you do to make this world a better place. Thank you.